The Philippine flags were waving and the chants of Leon echoed across center court as Alex Eala delivered the most dominant performance of her grass court career. A 6-2, 6-2 demolition of Priscilla Hahn in just 64 minutes. The crowd was electric, the atmosphere euphoric, but then everything suddenly changed in a moment that was never supposed to happen at a WTA 125 event in Birmingham. Cameras caught an incident that security had to intervene in, fans surged forward, officials rushed in panic, and within hours the clip had gone viral across 2 continents, leaving everyone asking what Alex Eala did that forced security to step in and why people were still talking about it days later. Birmingham, England, June 2, 2026, Edgbaston Priory Club, 2 p.m. The day had already begun with heartbreak, as just 24 hours earlier Alex Eala and her Czech partner Nikola Bartonkova had held a match point in their first-round doubles match against British second seeds Harriet Dart and Maya Lumsden, only to lose momentum in a dramatic deciding tiebreak and fall 4-6, 6-2, 11-9 after failing to close out victory at 9-8. But singles told a different story entirely. Walking onto center court as the top seed of Alexis Birmingham Open, Eala was greeted by an atmosphere unlike anything the historic venue had ever seen, with thousands of Philippine flags waving and chants of Laban, Laban, Laban echoing around the grass courts as fans from across the UK and even Manila gathered to watch their rising star. And she did not disappoint, facing Australia's Priscilla Hahn, ranked 143 in the world, and immediately asserting control in a match that underlined her dominance from the first game to the last. Previous meetings between them were split at 1 win each, with Hahn taking their most recent encounter at the WD Ningbo Open in October 2026 and Eala winning their first clash at Roehampton in 2023, leaving the head-to-head locked at 1-1 heading into what felt like a true rubber match. But from the very first point there was no real contest, as Ella's left-handed serve fired on all cylinders, her ground strokes were clean and penetrating, her movement on grass looked effortless, and her focus never wavered as she raced through the opening set in just 22 minutes, winning every first serve point and converting 3 break points to hand Hahn a brutal 6-0 bagel. The second set followed the same pattern with Eala storming to a 5-0 lead and standing on the edge of a rare double bagel before Hahn managed to claw back some pride by holding serve and breaking twice in succession to narrow it to 5-2, but the momentum shift was brief as Eala quickly reset and closed out the match with a confident love hold, sealing a 6-0 6-2 victory in just 59 minutes with a commanding 53-27 total points won. After the match, still catching her breath, she was handed a microphone by a tournament official as the crowd settled expecting the usual polite post-match interview, but Eala instead looked out over the sea of Philippine flags, at the families who had traveled across oceans, at children wearing her name, and at grandparents visibly emotional, before speaking directly to them and saying, "Salamat sa suporta. I didn't expect there to be so many Filipinos here. See you all tomorrow," which sent the stadium into a wave of cheers and emotional celebration. As she began walking toward the stands to acknowledge her youngest fans, everything shifted because at Edgbaston Priory Club in Birmingham on June 2, 2026, just after the scoreboard confirmed her 6-0, 6-2 win, the crowd of 17,000 rose as one, and what followed would turn an ordinary victory walk into a moment that security would soon struggle to control. Security barriers and reinforced stewards slowly began to settle as officials regained control of the situation, though the energy inside Edgbaston Priory Club remained electric, almost disbelieving at what had just unfolded in front of them. The chants of "Eala, Eala, Eala" faded into scattered applause and murmurs as fans replayed the moment on their phones, zooming in on the exact second the surge began. While tournament staff moved quickly to reset order and confirmed that no one had been injured in the brief but chaotic rush toward the court. Inside the corridors beneath the stands, Alex Eala was escorted by security toward the locker room, still visibly shaken but composed, repeatedly looking back as if trying to process how a simple gesture had escalated so quickly. Officials spoke in urgent tones about protocol breaches and crowd control, while her team tried to calm the situation and ensure she was safely out of reach of the remaining crowd. Outside, the stadium's atmosphere slowly shifted from chaos to stunned reflection. What was meant to be a routine post-match celebration had transformed into one of the most talked-about moments of the tournament, with footage already circulating online showing the exact instant fans breached the barriers and security rushed the court. And yet, even as order returned, one question lingered across the stands, the broadcast feeds, and every clipped replay being shared online: whether this was simply an overwhelming display of admiration for a rising star, or a moment that had crossed the line of what any sporting event could safely contain. Bag still hanging from her shoulder, the microphone now lowered in her hand as she glanced back one last time at the stands where the chaos had begun. Within moments, additional reinforcements poured onto center court, tightening the cordon and gradually pushing the crowd back behind the barriers, restoring a fragile sense of order as officials worked urgently to stabilize the situation. 10 p.m. The surge had fully subsided, replaced by a tense stillness that lingered across Edgbaston Priory Club like a held breath. No injuries were reported, and no arrests were made, but the emotional intensity of what had just occurred left both fans and officials visibly shaken. The image of Alex Eala being hurried off court, moments after delivering a commanding victory and an emotional address to her supporters, was already spreading rapidly across social media, destined to become one of the defining scenes of the tournament. In the aftermath, organizers moved quickly to review crowd control procedures and assess how a moment of celebration had escalated so rapidly into near chaos. Meanwhile, inside the player facilities, Eala remained with her team, processing the experience insolence as the noise of the stadium outside slowly faded into a distant murmur. What had begun as a dominant performance and a heartfelt connection with her supporters had, in less than a minute, turned into a moment that blurred the line between admiration and disorder, leaving Birmingham not just with a result on the scoreboard, but with a story that would be replayed, debated, and remembered long after the final match point. Entry points and clearly marked viewing lanes to prevent any repeat of the previous day's search. Staff moved through the grounds early, speaking in low voices, adjusting protocols, and quietly acknowledging that something fundamental had shifted at this tournament. What had once been treated as a standard WTA 125 event was now operating under the weight of global attention. Media crews returned to capture the morning atmosphere, but the tone was different, less about tennis alone and more about the phenomenon that had turned a routine victory into an international talking point. Inside the player facilities, Alex Eala went through her usual preparation in a quieter, more controlled rhythm. The echoes of the previous day still lingered, not in celebration, but in reflection. Security briefings were now part of the routine, and movement around the site was more structured, more deliberate, as officials worked to balance fan access with player safety. Outside, fans still gathered in numbers, but at a distance, held back by the new barriers and revised zones. Philippine flags were still present, still waving, but the atmosphere had shifted from spontaneous rush to organized anticipation. By the time play was scheduled to resume, Birmingham no longer felt like just a tournament stop. It had become the center of a conversation far bigger than tennis, about fandom, control, emotion, and the unpredictable space where sport meets global attention at full intensity. Access points and dedicated security personnel were expanded overnight, with the message made unmistakably clear: what happened yesterday would not be repeated under any circumstances. Yet even as the infrastructure tightened and the protocols became stricter, the memory of the surge, the panic, the urgency, the image of Alex Eala being escorted off center court, continued to linger, refusing to fade from the atmosphere of Birmingham. Because something had shifted. The tennis establishment had always understood that Alex Eala was popular. They had seen the flags at Indian Wells, heard the chants in Melbourne, and watched ticket demand explode for a WTA 125 event that suddenly felt anything but small. But they had never fully grasped the scale of what she represented until the crowd broke formation and security was forced to intervene. In that moment, the numbers stopped mattering. 25,000 fans at a WTA 125 on a Tuesday afternoon was no longer a statistic, it was a signal that the sport was dealing with something far larger than it was prepared for. For Eala, it became a turning point of a different kind. She had always carried the expectations of her nation, the pride of a growing global fanbase, and the quiet pressure of being watched. But now she had seen it from the other side. A living, moving ocean of people reaching not just for a player, but for a symbol. She understood what she meant to them, and she also understood how quickly admiration could tip into something uncontrollable. "I know it came from love," she had said, and she meant every word. But love, when it loses structure, can turn into chaos, and chaos, even when born from joy, can put people at risk. The tournament moved forward. Eala advanced to the next round, where she was set to face Beatriz Haddad Maia in what promised to be her toughest test yet. Security barriers were higher, entry points more controlled, and protocols more rigid than at any previous stage of the event, as Birmingham adjusted itself in real time to the scale of attention it had unexpectedly inherited. And the tennis world watched closely, not just to see who would win the next match, but to see whether Birmingham had truly learned its lesson. Because one thing was now undeniable: Alex Eala was no longer just a tennis player. She had become a movement. And movements, no matter how powerful or heartfelt, demand structure, protection and respect. Laban always. But now, more than ever, safety always. Shocking scenes at the Birmingham Open saw Alex Eala's dominant 6-0, 6-2 demolition of Priscilla Hahn overshadowed by an unexpected crowd surge that forced security to step in on center court. After thanking fans in Tagalog and extending a moment of connection toward a young supporter in the stands, the atmosphere quickly escalated as thousands of Philippine flags waved and hundreds of fans pressed forward, prompting officials to sprint onto the court and restore order. Within hours, footage of the incident had gone viral, surpassing 15 million views as the tournament issued an apology and reinforced security barriers across the venue. Despite the chaos, Eala remained calm and composed, later posting a message that acknowledged the emotional intensity of the moment while emphasizing safety and respect, reinforcing a growing reality in tennis. Her influence extends far beyond the baseline. The incident has sparked widespread debate about whether the tournament underestimated the scale of her global fanbase or whether event security systems are simply not built for this level of modern sporting popularity. What is now clear is that Alex Eala is no longer just a rising tennis star. She is a phenomenon that commands attention on and off the court, where passion, identity, and sport collide in ways the tennis world is still struggling. Philippine flags were waving and the chants of Leon echoed across center court as Alex Eala delivered the most dominant performance of her grass court career, a 6-2, 6-2 demolition of Priscilla Hahn in just 64 minutes. The crowd was electric, the atmosphere euphoric, but then everything suddenly changed in a moment that was never supposed to happen at a WTA 125 event in Birmingham. Cameras caught an incident that security had to intervene in, fans surged forward, officials rushed in panic, and within hours the clip had gone viral across 2 continents, leaving everyone asking what Alex Eala did that forced security to step in and why people were still talking about it days later. Birmingham, England, June 2, 2026, Edgbaston Priory Club, 2 p.m. The day had already begun with heartbreak, as just 24 hours earlier Alex Eala and her Czech partner Nikola Bartnikova had held a match point in their first-round doubles match against British second seeds Harriet Dart and Maya Lumsden, only to lose momentum in a dramatic deciding tiebreak and fall 4-6, 6-2, 11-9 after failing to close out victory at 9-8. But singles told a different story entirely. Walking onto center court as the top seed of Alexis Birmingham Open, Eala was greeted by an atmosphere unlike anything the historic venue had ever seen, with thousands of Philippine flags waving and chants of Laban, Laban, Laban.